The evolution of global terrorism introduced into terrorist definition of terrorism. Terrorism is the use of violence or the threat of violence by groups or individuals to achieve political, ideological, or religious goals through the spread of fear. Shifting dynamics of terrorism. Terrorism has evolved in terms of its objectives, actors, and methods, from traditional armed groups to individual cells, lone wolves. Terrorism adapts with advancements in technology and globalization. Global terrorism developmentus. Pre- and post-9/11 era. 9/11 terrorism was more localized and regional, with groups like Al-Qaeda beginning to expand their reach internationally. Post-9/11, terrorism became a global threat, particularly targeting Western nations. The September 11, 2001, attacks by Al-Qaeda triggered the U.S.-led global war on terror. B. Rise of ISIS and digital terrorism. Emergence of ISIS. 2014, ISIS emerged as a global terrorist group utilizing social media to recruit members, spread ideology, and conduct propaganda. Tech-based terrorism. The use of social media by terrorist groups became a vital tool to mobilize global support, especially from individuals in Western. Many attacks inspired by ISIS were carried out by lone wolves. See evolution of terrorist attacks from large-scale attacks to small-scale assaults. Since major attacks like 9/11 and the 2004 Madrid bombings, terrorist strategies have shifted towards smaller-scale attacks, such as stabbings and vehicle rammings. These are easier to execute and harder for security forces to detect. Lone wolf actors. The rise of attacks carried out by individuals not directly connected to terrorist organizations, but inspired by their ideologies, presents a new challenge for counterterrorism efforts. Driving factors in the evolution of terrorism. Online radicalization. The internet has become a crucial medium for radicalization, with many websites, forums, and apps providing extremist content. The radicalization process can happen more rapidly due to the availability of violent content and propaganda narratives being widely disseminated. B. Social and political injustice. Discount with governments, poverty, social injustice, and political conflict are key factors exploited by terrorist groups to recruit members. In regions like the Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia, political instability has created a breeding ground for extremist groups. See state involvement. Some states are directly or indirectly involved in supporting terrorist groups for geopolitical interests. This support can include weapons, logistics, or protection for certain groups. Global response to terrorism. Counterterrorism efforts. The war on terror. Following 9/11, the U.S. led a global campaign against terrorism, beginning with the invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq to overthrow regimes that supported terrorist groups. Multinational cooperation. Many countries now collaborate on intelligence sharing, strengthening border security, and developing de-radicalization programs to combat the global terrorist threat. B. De-radicalization approach as education and awareness, increasing literacy and promoting accurate religious knowledge to prevent misinterpretation of religious teachings. Reintegration programs, efforts to reintegrate former terrorists into society through psychological, social, and economic support programs. See counterterrorism policy. Strengthening legislation. Many countries have tightened laws to punish activities related to terrorism, including terrorist financing and foreign combatant involvement. International law enforcement. International courts, such as the International Criminal Court, also address terrorist crimes that cross borders. Future threats of terrorism. Cyberterrorism and cyberattacks. With advancing technology, cyberattacks by terrorist groups are becoming increasingly likely. This threat involves sabotaging critical infrastructures such as power grids, financial systems, and transportation networks. B. Development of non-conventional weapons. Biological and chemical weapons. There is growing concern that terrorist groups could use non-conventional weapons, such as chemical or biological agents, which can cause mass destruction with limited resources. See radicalization of the youth. With the rise of internet use among younger generations, there is a heightened risk of radicalization through social media platforms, particularly among marginalized and vulnerable communities. Conclusion. Terrorism continues to adapt to global dynamics, with evolving and shifting threats. Through international cooperation, comprehensive approaches, and de-radicalization efforts. The global community can address these threats. However, the focus must remain on addressing the root causes of radicalization to provide long-term solutions.